So first and foremost is starting before you're ready. So when we think about monetization, one of the biggest challenges that podcasters face is they really get hung up on, well, I'm not in the top 2%. I'm not in the top 1%. I don't have the same amount of listeners as like a Joe Rogan, right? But the reality is the value in your show comes from engaged listeners, repeat listeners, and niching down. So don't focus so much on how many downloads you have. Focus on if you are having the same listeners come back, even if you have small downloads, are they consistent or slightly growing? Is your content serving the same audience? Because if you know who you're talking to, who is listening to your show, and that your consumption rate is good, you're at that 70% or better. So that's about industry average from what I've been doing research on. Correct me if you know a different number. But start there and know the value of your show, even if that's just a small amount, because there are so many different ways to monetize in that. So once you know kind of the value of your show as far as who's listening, I specialize in host-read ads. Then you can look for companies or other businesses who have a similar target audience as you. Who else is serving the same amount of people? So once you find that, then you can start out with that outreach. You can send a media kit. You can, in my case, I went to a lot of cattle industry trade shows and started casually throwing it out there when I was talking to people, because I'm a rancher myself and my podcast is about ranching. So I'd say, oh, well, this will be valuable on my ranch, but actually, I have this podcast. So having those conversations and going back to that original point about starting before you're ready, I just think, one of my favorite quotes by Lemony Snicket is, if we wait until we're ready, we'll be waiting for the rest of our lives. And sometimes that can be frustrating when people are saying just start, but it's just the simple reality. You got to get over yourself and whatever excuses you're making and start going for it. I've had way more no's than I had yeses, but I still make money.
Yeah. Would you just say that one more time? Just say that sentence one more time.
I've had way more no's than I've had more no's than yeses, but I'm still making money.
I love it. So you start before you believe you're ready. You look at that 70% or better consumption rate. You don't think to yourself, like when I go to Facebook groups of podcast hosts and people say, hey, I want to monetize, and they kind of get bombarded. Tell me if you've ever seen this, Shaye. They kind of get bombarded with negative feedback coming from especially the bigger names, but certainly the names that are just getting started too, where they say, don't even think about that until you have 30,000 downloads per episode or whatever. And I don't know if that's their real voice because, you're reading it. And so that's just how I read it when they say it. But yeah, it's like, don't be thinking that I have to have some minimum. I have to have some amount. You got started a little bit earlier than that. Where were you in terms of numbers when you decided I'm going to ask people if they could do a host-read ad with me?
Gosh, so this is almost 5 years ago when I did that. And I started in college. So I was still early in my college and I was at a trade show and I don't even know if I was at, maybe within like a month, my episodes were hitting 100 downloads.
Okay.
So it was still on the lower end comparatively to some people. But I also thought about it. So my audience is cattle producers. And I've niched down within that too, to more progressive cattle producers. Well, if you think about it, people working in production agriculture only make up 2% of the population. So that's really niche down in itself. And you continue to niche down. Why would I expect my show to have the same amount of downloads as someone else who maybe has a broader audience or a broader niche? And I guess I was determined to make money off my podcast because partially because people told me I never could, but I knew it was possible. And so I figured, why not?
I'm writing this down. I love this. I was determined. I knew it was possible. Why not? And I think the listener should be saying that as well. I was determined. I knew it was possible. Why not?